Welcome to Scary Stories. Got a new Christmas ghost story for you coming up at that time on screen. But first, I'm a full-time werewolf. The werewolf can't change back. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I caught lycanthropy from what I thought was an ordinary wolf, and now I'm permanently locked in as a werewolf, unable to return to human form. I've only become a sort of full-on werewolf once or twice, and that was back toward the early days. I'm mainly humanoid looking, and I can even pass for human in a crowd if I wear a hat and a bulky coat. I can control my temper about as well as any other steroid freak, and so far that's been good enough to keep me out of any major trouble. I also spend my winters sharing my wealth by secretly leaving presents in the night for disadvantaged kids of working-class families. I can't help but be sneaky about stashing the presents away in these kids' homes. Part of that is I don't want any credit for leaving the presents. Part of it was something my accountant said to me, and the other part is my naturally sneaky wolf nature. Because I can no longer help it. I am part wolf, all the time. But there are some major differences from me before and me now, which I'll get into some detail about. It's hard to even remember that I wasn't always this way, but I was a fairly normal guy once upon a time. One of the companies I own is a shipping company, and I was doing the undercover boss thing there. I took a manual labor job so I could better understand why 2 employees had recently quit work at that location. Anyway, believe it or not, this freaking wolf was being shipped through our office. It was in this old wooden box that didn't seem like it could possibly be legal to ship a creature like that inside of. While I was feeling sorry for it and getting friendly with it, this animal decided to try to bite 2 of my fingers off. It held them tight in its mouth, and I never felt such pain in my life. I don't know why, but the wolf opened its mouth for a second, and I withdrew my hand as fast as you would have done it. I had 2 broken and bloody fingers, and I was screaming in a panic. I really was thinking that they were going to have to be amputated. It was a horrible mess. Someone drove me to the hospital and they stitched me up and they told me both fingers would heal. I was surprised by this, but quite relieved, obviously. It had seemed so much worse in the beginning. Well, by the next morning, not only were the bones in my fingers healed, but the skin was better and the stitches had just sort of popped out and landed on my bedsheets. It was like the body had rejected them or something. Over the course of the morning into the early afternoon, I found myself in excruciating pain as parts of my body seemed to be ripping themselves apart and reforming themselves on a molecular level. My eyes changed on that morning, with my vision becoming far more powerful than it had ever been before, especially at night. They're blue now, too. A very bright and light blue like you'd see in a husky or whatever. I gained over 100 pounds that morning as well, and it was nearly all muscle, too. I'm a few inches taller than I used to be, and I'm as strong as 3 men now. I'm fast, too, but I don't want to clock myself. I sometimes get hairier arms and legs than other times, but I more or less stay in this shape and form 24/7 these days. I have not yet transformed back to human, and I'm starting to give up hope that it'll ever happen. But I am not in pain, and I am stronger than I ever was before. So I have to say there is an upside to the situation. There are only a handful of people who even know about this. There are a few dozen more who understand parts of it. I keep myself out of the public eye, and I hide in my compound lifting weights and running my various operations remotely from there. When I go out, it's at night, usually wearing a hoodie or a hat. I said before I can pass in a crowd, but that doesn't mean I feel I should push it. I'm fine if I keep my head down and keep walking, but I wouldn't want someone to look at me too closely though. I won't lie, part of the reason I deliver Christmas gifts anonymously is that an accountant figured out some way that it was more cost effective to do it this way, for some reason that only a tax accountant would understand. Plus it's just plain fun. I get to be like Santa Claus and like Batman at the same time. But even with the super stealth powers of a half werewolf, I do sometimes get caught in the act. It's just that it's the act of giving at Christmas time, and so far I've been able to talk my way out of trouble. Like, one time I got caught by a father who was convinced I was planting bombs in his house. He said that if his family tried to open those presents, they'd all be blown sky high. So I asked him to pick out any present for me, and he chose one. Then I opened it up, revealing that it was a big package of kielbasi. That's a kind of sausage from Eastern Europe, basically. This one came wrapped in plastic, and I took a big bite out of it, drawing gasps from the family. Then I chewed it down, plastic packaging and all, and let out a big belch. The family laughed nervously, and I offered to take the presents back if they didn't want them. They wanted them, but they still nervously asked me to open another one for them first, just to make sure. I enjoy those kinds of moments because the one major drawback to this situation is how lonely it can get. There's obviously no other member of my half-species, no female of my kind. I don't think it would be fair of me to date a normal woman. I think that even when I tried to be gentle, I would accidentally be too rough. So my life is working out and managing my businesses from a distance. When the weather gets cooler though, I get to work amassing survey data to understand what gifts might best serve the needs and wants of these kids. Some families need a new laptop or tablet most, while another kid might need a guitar or keyboard to begin learning music. In other words, we spy on the families. That's another one of the businesses I own. We monitor the public so that we know what ads should be sent to them next. I'm using this tech at Christmas time not to sell things to those people, but to find out what we can give them. Again, I don't care if this is the right or ethical way to do things. I'm a wolf. I do what I think must be done, period. In the modern day, Santa really does know when you've been bad or good. So, be good. For goodness sake. Hey, someone asked me if there are any female werewolves in our new Werewolf digital coloring book, and I have to say no. I had heard women like the digital coloring book, so I guess I mostly focused on putting macho-looking male werewolves in there. It's 70-something pages for $209, and it's a digital download, so you don't have to worry so much about it being mailed to you in time if you get it for a Christmas gift. My friend Checkerphil said it was nightmare fuel, and I take that as a high compliment in this case. Info on how to get it is in the description. And now, here's a letter from a guy who claims to be a rich bastard. I've known some guys like this in real life, and they like to dangle things in front of you to see if you snatch at them. If this next story isn't real, I think it was at least written by someone who's had to deal with rich people in person. It's a Christmas ghost story though, so I'm gonna say thanks for the submission, and I'm gonna read it to you guys to see what you think. And this contributor calls his tale, My Father's Christmas Ghost Story. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my father was a very successful man, at least in the eyes of his generation. I didn't really see too much of him growing up, but each Christmas he would force me to sit and pay attention to this same exact story that he had told me the year before. It was a ghost story, and I found that part entertaining, but it was also a moral lecture, and I hated that part. Father knew I hated it, and by the time I was a teenager, he revealed to me that my loathing of the story was the main reason he kept repeating it. You see, my father told me when he thought I was mature enough to understand, this was a story about a turning point in his life. He felt that after this ghost experience, that he had become a different man than he had been before, and he wanted me to grow up understanding this important lesson through repetition. You see, he saw ghosts, and seeing those ghosts was horrifying to Father. He remembered it as a traumatizing experience. In his mind, telling me this story which happened to him years earlier might save me, his son, some trauma, and sort of slip some wisdom into my head and heart too if he was lucky. So now I'd like to tell you the story from my memory, in my father's own words as well as I can remember them. And if my father is somehow listening to this, then Father, please forgive me if I get facts mixed up. I will try not to. The year was 1947. It was a good year for America. A good year for business. A good year for baseball. 1947 was a good year. It was a prosperous time, so I gave my employees a raise across the board. Some of them pointed out that the raise was not the same as the rate of inflation or some such poppycock, and I fired them immediately. People said that was harsh since Christmas was coming up, and so I fired those complainers too. It was easy to replace them all from within, and when men saw the opportunities for advancement in the company, morale improved. Sure, some families went penniless for Christmas, but their fathers should have watched their mouths. That's how I felt. But you know what, son? I was wrong to feel that way. I had been harsh, and I had been a force for Satan to use for evil purposes. But I didn't come to this realization randomly. I was forced to understand this through a series of circumstances thrust upon me that were just as harsh as what I had been doing to my fellow man. Son, that night I awoke from a nightmare in which all of my ancestors took turns spitting on me and throwing disgusting things on me as I was locked in a stockade in a public square. Somehow I knew that these were my forefathers, and that they were sickened by me and ashamed of me. It was the most realistic dream of my life. But when I woke up, I found the waking world to be far, far more horrific. I awoke screaming and parched. So then I got out of my bed and I walked in the darkness toward the bathroom to get some water. Well, there were dead people lined up in some sort of weird military fashion in the hallway. I stepped back into my room and I walked backward into another cold, dead body. I turned on the light, and they were everywhere. They looked familiar. It was as though I had seen them before. I thought I must still be sleeping. The dead all raised their arms to point at me. They all started speaking at once, talking over each other in hoarse, raspy voices. They each blamed me for their deaths. I've never killed anyone, I told them. But they each told me that I had indeed been their murderer. These were people who had lost their money, who had gone broke, who had starved or died in some other way related to their poverty. I didn't see how it would be fair to blame me. I was not the only employer in the world. If I fire a man, nothing is to prevent him gaining employment elsewhere. It isn't a death sentence. But then these dead men, their stories, they all started growing more complex, more detailed. When families are denied a chance to succeed, opportunities are lost for all of humanity. None of these men had been asking for charity, and yet I had found a way to be cruelly uncharitable in each of their cases anyway. Son, I want you to understand that my business will someday be your business, and on the day when that happens, you will become responsible for the lives of not only the men you employ, but also their wives and their children. When God chooses us to manage great wealth, He wants us to be kind and to share His bounty with others. The Western world is spreading the wealth to the poor and middle class more than any other society in history. I ask you and your generation to continue that trend, and to make even the poorest person of your future time richer than the richest man of my past. And so that was how Father would end the story, with a plea to me to be kind to the poors. Of course, as you probably know, my generation oversaw the greatest vacuuming up of wealth in world history, so that the poor today have far less than even the poor of the Great Depression. And that generation was allowed to sing "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?" while we don't allow you to sing protest songs against the rich anymore at all. We ran headlines saying Oliver Anthony was punching down when he was a factory worker singing about politicians in Washington. You would need to make $70,000 a year to make what a poor man made at an average job during the Great Depression. So I would say that my father's ghost story had very little impact on me. When I took over the company, I let everyone know that things were going to be different. For instance, my father used to have a framed quote from Mark Twain on the wall of the main office. It read, "Always do what is right. It'll gratify half of mankind and astound the other." Mark Twain. Now I took that down, and I replaced it with a framed poster of Cartman from South Park saying, "I do what I want." My father once told me that one of his life's goals was to bring luxury and comfort into the lives of even the poorest American. But I say, What's the fun in having cool stuff if poor people can afford to have it too? Like, how can I enjoy air conditioning unless I can see you sweating? That's why my favorite part of my job is firing people. I waited until December 1st to fire 24 employees this year, just to make sure I was putting a damper on their holiday. My attitude is, the less money I pay my workers, the more money for me. And the less time they spend being happy, why then there's just that much more happiness available for me to enjoy instead. And I am the one who should have their happiness, just as only people like me should enjoy any freedom. I will at least know what to do with it. What do poor people know about happiness or freedom? They'd probably waste it on puppies and small children, the idiots. And if the ghost of Christmas past wants to haunt me, I say let him. I don't even believe in any of that religion stuff anyway. I only believe in cold, hard cash. Ghosts aren't real, and what my father saw was his guilty conscience. It was the fatal flaw of his entire generation. They saw poor people as having value. My generation is correcting his generation's mistakes as quickly as we can. You know, the Magna Carta, that's what started the trouble, granting rights to humans who aren't even nobility. Don't worry, we'll do away with the pretenses soon enough. You will have nothing. You will eat insects while we eat beef. And you, my dear friend, you will be oh so happy. Merry Christmas. If you want to meet a person who's really caring, why not try Sharon? Well, it rhymed. Please join me in thanking Sharon Smirnoff for helping me make this episode possible. Sharon is a member of our PayPal subscribers club, which you can too join at peterbernard.com to join. We also have channel memberships here on YouTube which have the same perks, including our secret uncensored Dogman episodes. Here to explain it in more detail is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/peterbernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.